In this video, we are going to cover question translation and breakdown. And so if we think about it, commonly people will study for the PMP exam. They'll try to get their arms around the content. And then when they start doing practice questions, it's not uncommon for them to literally do a faceplant and go, "Arg, these questions are driving me nuts." This video hopefully will be helpful in starting your translation process of interpreting questions to how do I choose the best answer, how do I ignore the things I don't need to be focusing on, etc. So among other things, first, you need to focus on the last part of the question, the last sentence or so, because that's going to frame the entire situation. So read the last sentence first, then the full situation. That'll keep you more mentally alert later into the exam as well. Second, read the entire question and eliminate any distractors. Distractors are things that are not intended to have value, but they sure look that way. You know, like the shiny penny type thing, so to speak. Well, okay, no, I'm supposed to get food. I don't need a shiny penny type thing. And then third, the candidate should eliminate the two worst answers. Now, one thing I want you to remember here is it's not choose the best answer. It could be. It could be. I mean, that's like I say, finally they should choose the best answer. But your best option might end up being the least worst option. So just remember, you might have, four or, come January 2, 2021, there might be more than that on some, more than four options on some questions. And you would be expected to choose the best of what's there, which could be the least worst. Like I said in a class yesterday online virtually, I said to a guy, I said, bottom line is you might have to choose what sucks least, because they all might be bad. So you might not always have the right answer, but you choose the best of what's there or the least worst. Now, a calculation, pretty straightforward. What is the CPI for the following data? AC, PV, EV, BAC. Okay, CPI is EV divided by AC. So 200 divided by 200 is going to get me 1.0. Now, that might seem pretty straightforward if you have studied earned value, and you might be concerned about, oh my gosh, yeah, but what if they do who knows what? Okay, let me clarify. I believe that a good perspective to get ready for the exam is to expect relatively clean numbers. $200, $400, $500, $1,000, things like that. To where if you understand the relationships between certain numbers, like in this case earned value and actual cost, you might not even have to use the calculator to be able to come up with the number. And as I said in another video, a lot of times people prepare for the calculations and that they prepared way more than whatever their luck of the draw of questions ended up being. So they were actually a bit disappointed. Okay, so that's calculation. Now, I will say as well, you're going to choose a number that's closest. So I think I can say this without stating anything that I shouldn't state. But I might have had an exam and I might have done a calculation and I could swear I did the right calculation 3 or 4 times and the numbers just weren't there. So I just went with the number that was closest to that, above or below, And, so I mean, in the magnitude of $500, if something's accurate within $50 and you feel like you're doing the calculation right, I would go with whatever number is closest. Now, another thing also, like a cost performance index, sometimes, well, it's not sometimes, it's all the time. If you go like 0.8, 0.833, so if you were calculating something that a CPI is that's based on a CPI, 0.8, 0.83, 0.833, you're going to get some slightly different numbers. Now, again, I expect your numbers to be relatively clean where, 400 divided by 500 is going to get you 0.8, and so that's the expectation. But worst case, if you're in the ballpark, you go with what's closest. Now, in this case, sample 1, you're a project manager for an environmental excavating project. Okay, so let's see. Let's read the last sentence. What's the best solution to fix the problem? So you're the PM on some sort of an environmental excavating project. Okay, I don't know what that is, so I'm a PM on a project. As I monitor progress, I determine activities are taking longer than expected or longer than estimated. Because of holidays, I failed to consider when creating the schedule. What's the best solution to fix the problem? Now, you could also be asked what would cause the problem, but in this case, what would fix it? So, breaking it down, okay, you're the PM. You don't necessarily know about environmental excavating. That's a distractor. You shouldn't have to have specific industry experience. Things are taking longer than expected, and you didn't factor in holidays. So how do you fix this? So if we translate that, you're the PM, your project is behind schedule because you didn't factor holidays into the schedule. What will fix it? That's a lot simpler question. So you implement a schedule change control and rebaseline the schedule with the holidays factored in. That would be a really good answer. Now, you might have that, and 3 others, you might not have that. And 4 options, and you choose probably what's closest to something like that. Sample question number 2. You've taken over a project from another project manager who the sponsor felt was unsuccessful. The project represents a new type of work at your company. The cost is $50,000 over budget, and the former PM did not view the schedule as a useful tool. Where should you place your initial focus? Now, I could just look at that question right there and go, we got a stakeholder issue with the sponsor. We've got some possible risk because it's a new type of work at the company. We appear to be over budget, and there's probably not a solid schedule or a practical schedule based on that last sentence before where should I place my focus. So depending upon which of those I valued as important, I could probably come up with answer A, B, C, or D as a good answer. Now, breaking it down. Okay, so the sponsor issue is possibly a distractor as far as the sponsor not feeling the original project manager, whatever. The second sentence about it being new at the company, possibly a distractor. I'd have to see what 4 options I had to choose from. Third sentence establishes 2 facts. Facts are huge here, and in most questions, if you can recognize them. We're $50,000 over budget. You don't know if it's $100,000 or a $10 million project, so that's potentially an issue. I mean, if it's a $10 million project, $50,000 might be nothing. But, if you work on $1 million projects, $50,000 might be nothing. If you work on $100,000 projects, you might all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, well, but you don't know how big the project is here. Fact 2, it appears the previous PM did not value the schedule, which could possibly have led to that budget issue. So translate. You're a new PM for an existing project. The project represents a new type of work at your company because you don't have a total budget to tell you if the $50,000 over budget is major or minor. Let's assume that's a distractor right now. There's either no schedule or one that's seriously deficient. Where should you place your initial effort? Based on what I see there, I would say first focus on reviewing, readjusting, and modifying the existing schedule. If there is none, you need to create one. Now, some might be tempted to say, well, no, we need to get that sponsor, that key stakeholder, we need to sync up with them. You wouldn't go to them and say what's going on unless you had a potential solution to a problem. So if you're behind schedule, you'd probably want to get a schedule set up and say, this is what the story that we believe, the nonfiction story that we believe we can deliver looks like. What do you think about that, for example? Now, situational question number 3. You're halfway through an internet upgrade project. Okay, cool. Okay, now, let's read the last sentence first just to be safe. Activity G requires a very experienced resource. What should you focus on first? What should you focus on first? Okay. Halfway through a project. F has an early start at day 7, a late start at day 12. So that appears it has some slack, because if the earliest it could start is day 7, the latest it could start is day 12, that means it has 5 days of flexibility. CPI is 0.92, which means I'm getting 92 cents out of every dollar I spend. Scheduled performance index is 0.87, which means I'm progressing at 87% of the rate that I expected. Neither of those are good, but I also don't know what my tolerances are, like plus or minus 10%, for example. The project has 18 stakeholders. Okay, that, I don't know if I really care about that or not. G requires a very experienced resource. Okay, what should I focus on first? Boy, there's a lot of junk in that trunk. Halfway through, so it appears I still have half the project to do, so I still have some breathing room to get things done, to make some adjustments. F I'm not going to worry about because it has 5 days of flexibility. If it slips 5 days, all of a sudden I'll worry about it, because then it would be on the critical path. Or if it starts to slip and gets near that, I might start paying attention to it. The state of the schedule is slightly worse than the state of the budget. 0.87 is farther away from 1.0 than the 0.92 is, so the schedule's in slightly worse shape. And 18 stakeholders, okay, I don't know what that means in this context. I mean, for all I know, it could be 1,800, could be 1, could be 1,000. I don't know exactly what that has to do with this project, compared to the numerical 0.92 and 0.87. G requires a very experienced resource. Okay, cool. Doesn't mean they're not available. We don't have anything that says anything positive or negative toward that in the question. So I think the SPI is what I would pay attention to. Now, breaking it down. So, as I say here, try your hand at translating it. Feel free to pause it and see if you can kind of translate it the way I did there. And then unpause when applicable. So, here we go. You're 50% done. You don't have enough information about the network diagram, so thus F appears to be a distractor because it does have 5 days of slack or float. Spending efficiency is 0.92. Productivity is 0.87. Productivity is kind of, a generic word for schedule efficiency. Number of stakeholders and resource issue on activity G are likely distractors. So I'm going to focus on schedule first because, like I said, it's worse than the budget. Sample question number 4. Okay, this is an example of what? What is an example of what? Well, let's see. You've been involved in a project as a project manager. After much analysis, arguing, and debate with the 17 stakeholders, the sponsor has made the decision to outsource a key piece of work on the project because of the risk associated with it. This is an example of what? Okay, so let's see. So I'm a PM on a project. Sponsor has decided to outsource a key piece because of the uncertainty. My initial reaction is something like procurement or risk, maybe mitigation or transference. So let's see. Feel free to pause. Feel free to translate this and then start playing again, if you will. Okay, you're the project manager. It's been decided that a piece of work will be outsourced. This is an example of what? So this is basically situational terminology. So the decision to outsource is based on a make or buy analysis, and as a result of that analysis, a make or buy decision. And that make or buy analysis and decision, that's part of procurement management. Now, when we think about problem solving with the situational questions, you want to focus on solving the problems posed by the situational questions. That's typically the most challenging thing you'll face. So we're going to walk through some samples here. and the logic to get you there. Now, situational question number 1. Which is the best solution? Okay, so you're the PM on a project. It's been discovered that testing will begin a week late. What's the best solution? So I'm just going to, I can see it's A on the screen, but I'm just going to think out loud here. Let's see, perform analysis about the delay and if it indeed will not impact scope, schedule, or cost of the project, approve it, and keep the project running. Yeah, there's nothing in the question that says testing beginning a week late is going to cause the project to be late. So A is a good answer so far. B, ask senior management to choose this. No. You go to senior management with options, and then you let them decide what they want to do. But I like A better than B. C, ignore the testing issue because that part of the project hasn't come up yet. If it comes down to B versus C, I guess I like C slightly better than B, but technically the minute you are aware of something, you should, potentially start to deal with it as needed. We don't know if you necessarily need to start dealing with it yet, but C versus B, I like C better than B, but C versus A, I still like A better. D, ask the sponsor for an opinion about Okay, the sponsor supports the project. They shouldn't know anything about converging system test and user acceptance testing. So if it doesn't violate the triple constraint, the triangle of scope, schedule, and cost, then the PM can say, here's how we're going to do it. We don't see anything in the question that says it's going to push the finish date out, just something in the nonfiction story. Nonfiction story being the overall plan we're trying to do is going to be a week late. Now, question number 2, which is the best solution? You're the manager of the project. It's been discovered that testing will begin a week late, causing the project finish date to slip a week. Ooh, now that's different. Okay, A, we already looked at. If the finish date goes out, that's a different story. After analyzing the problem and potential solutions, alert senior management to the problem and potential solutions and implement the solution they recommend. I like that. You don't go upstairs and say, I got a problem. You go upstairs and you go, we got a problem that's come up or is going to be coming up. Here's some solutions we've come up with. Which would you prefer us do? That's the PMI land or PMI zip code perspective. So a B in this case is better than A. If you know something's going to be causing the finish date to slip a week, you would not ignore it necessarily with C. And again, D, the sponsor shouldn't have to know about system and UAT or whatever, so I like B better than A. And C and D don't fit like they did with the previous question as well. So you can see the logic there. If it does violate the triple constraint, then senior management or the sponsor would say yay or nay to the option or options you present them. Now, situational question number 3. Who can best resolve the problem? You're a manager for a project awaiting some new positions to be filled. The schedule is already set to include the work of these new resources. Oops. The start date of these resources has passed without hearing back from the client on signing approval for these new resources. Who can best resolve the problem? So, here's the deal. Watch my hands, if you will. Here's your organization. Here's your customer. Okay. Now, if you're the PM, their point of contact over there, you're interacting together back and forth. Okay. If time goes on and they're not doing what they need to be doing and that's getting in your way, you don't go to their boss, but you go up to your boss or above you, senior management, and you let senior management go over and you talk, and senior management would talk to the people on that side, and then they would help move things along, so to speak. Now, in that case, I do like senior management. The project manager appears to already be doing it. The sales executive, that's not one of our roles necessarily. And then the program manager, that's somebody above the project manager. So technically they could go over, but we don't really know if this is a program, a project, or what have you. I mean, it looks like it's a project, I guess, but we don't know if it's part of a program. So senior management is somebody above the project manager that could go over to the other side and say, hey, we need some guidance here. We have an issue here. Can we escalate this? Now, situational question number 4. The project is not progressing well. Oops. It's behind schedule and over budget. The project manager has determined that the schedule was created without adequate team input and needs to be recreated. Oops. That nonfiction story that I call a schedule all of a sudden appears to be a fictional story, meaning not necessarily reality. Reworking the schedule could affect the overall project finish date. I would not be surprised. Who can best address the schedule problem? Well, let's see. The PM, because the PM needs to put together a new schedule for approval by senior management. Okay, that makes sense. Senior management, because senior management needs to approve a violation of the triple constraint. Well, yeah, but they wouldn't really tell the PM make a schedule. They would, the PM would come to them and say, here's a schedule I put together based on this problem. Does it work for you? And then they would either say yay, nay, or go back, try it again, and see us again. Functional manager, because functional manager is in control of resources on the schedule. No, all functional management does in the PMI land zip code is make resources available. That's it. That's all they do. And then team members, because team members have input to the schedule. Well, they could provide input to resolve the problem, but they will not resolve the problem. It's on the PM to create the schedule. So yeah, generally the PM does not go to senior management or the sponsor with a problem without having potential solutions. They don't go up there and just say we got a problem, because that basically is like whining. Would you like some cheese with your wine, so to speak. So they would go to senior management or the sponsor and say, we've got a problem. Here is an option or options we've come up with. Are you good with this one, if it's one, or which one of these do you want to do? Now, that last piece there on the screen right now, remember they hired you to get the work of the project complete. So you need to work through those issues instead of going up there all the time. Now, situational question number 5. The project is behind schedule because the key estimator wasn't available when the schedule was created. Well, that's a problem right there from the start. Senior management is aware of this and has allowed the project manager to rebaseline the schedule. What process will fix the problem? Okay. So they've been allowed to rebaseline the schedule. So develop schedule probably is going to be driven by a change request. Sequence activities is part of the ultimate schedule. The WBS is a scope thing, so that's a distractor there. Control schedule is a really good option here, and here's why. It creates a change request to rebaseline the schedule, and if approved, then you would go to the develop schedule process to do that. Technically, you could go to either activity, sequencing, duration estimating, or develop schedule if you were adding or removing or modifying activities, predecessors, or durations, but technically develop schedule is where you kind of integrate all that together. So doing control schedule would fix the problem via develop schedule. Now, in this case, in the case of number 6, we just have a different sentence at the end. In what process did this problem get created? And I was already talking about that. Develop schedule is where the story was put in place, so to speak, the ideally nonfiction story, in other words, the reality that we're going to try to do. And as a result, if you didn't do develop schedule right to begin with because that key estimator wasn't available, that's where the problem started. That's where the problem started.